All right, we are recording. Hello, everyone. We're back for another Malazan discussion, and I am joined here today by two wonderful friends. We have Dr. AP Canavan making a comeback here. Hello, AP. How are you?
I am very well, and obviously I'm overdressed. Look at the gun show. I rolled my sleeves up because you said informal. That's about as informal as I get. And then you two come in looking like this. It's like the YMCA.
Well, I thought since last time you and I accidentally twinned wearing the same outfit, that this time it would only be fair if I were to twin with Ruthan Badd, who is our other guest here. We look like twins, don't we, Ruthan?
We do. Philip, I must compliment you on your excellent shape. You look like a mix between a Muay Thai boxer and some kind of physics professor. So congratulations on that. And thank you for having me on your channel again.
Oh, it's a delight to have you here, Ruthan Badd. We are actually here not to show off our excellent physiques. We are here to discuss Stephen Erickson's Bauchelain and Korbal Broach novellas. Specifically, we are doing the three that are collected in the second collection of novellas, and these include Wurms of Blearmouth, which we will be discussing here today on my channel. But we also will be discussing Cracked Pot Trail, and that is going to be on AP's channel, A Critical Dragon. And we are going to discuss the third tale in here, The Fiends of Nightmaria. So we have some really fun stuff, but we're going to do separate videos for each of these discussions today. So today we're just doing Wurms of Blearmouth, which is a tale that follows on more or less the Lees of Laughter's End. And this is one of the ones that we discussed earlier, one of the novellas that is collected in the first novella collection. Our discussion of that video is on AP's channel, A Critical Dragon, The Lees of Laughter's End. We had a good time discussing that one, didn't we?
We have a good time discussing all of these. They are.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
I was just going to say that.
Unique stories.
These are all fun to discuss, but these are, I would say, the Bauchelain and Korbal Broach stories are perhaps the most absurd, the most ridiculous and fun things you could encounter in the Malazan world. I mean, obviously, Stephen Erickson was having a blast when he was writing these stories, and they are full of just the full array of his humor on display. There's the absurdist, there's the horror-related humor, there's humor about the human body and just how ridiculous we are. You name it, it's there. I mean, there's gallows humor. It's a display of humor, but there are some themes in there too that we'll be able to discuss today. But so Wurms of Blearmouth, following on Lees of Laughter's End, and I think we have to just go right into spoilers, or do we want to say anything non-spoilery here, or?
So, well, in a very, before we go into spoilers, although to be honest, it's much easier to do with spoilers, but where the first three books all have a certain sort of parody or satire that they're going for. This is very much the dark folk tale of an isolated community on a small coast of a somewhere in the middle of nowhere, but it's a small coast, and it's a wrecker's coast. So after the Lees of Laughter's End, ships wash up, and that's how this community have made their living. And if we think then of particularly England and Cornwall, where Erickson was living for some time, there were all of these sort of dark folk tales and superstitious stories, and a history of all of these isolated little villages that had sprung up, that survived on basically ripping the cargo out of crashed ships, and you know, not finding any survivors repeatedly. So I think, like all of these, it is darkly absurdist. There are horror elements, there are folktale elements, but that's really the impetus behind this one. That's the style of this one, that it's a small, almost English seaside village that is cut off from almost everything else. Everyone knows each other, is a very small community, and it's all those fractures within the community. The fact that everyone sort of knows each other, but they all hate each other. And they're trapped in this little tiny hamlet, and their major source of income are the ships that crash off the coast. So that, you know, that sort of sets the scene, and that's what this book is, this novella. And then after that, I think we have to go to spoilers, because we wouldn't want to ruin any of the reveals.
Right. So makes you kind of rethink your coastal vacation a little bit now, doesn't it? With the distinction between combers and wreckers, being combers are ones who just go down and sift through wreckage, and wreckers are the ones who deliberately lure ships onto rocky waters and with you know, a fake lighthouse or something. Is that, do I have that right? Is that the distinction? Or
to be honest, my piracy days are long behind me. I really haven't, you know, misspent youth. I honestly don't know. I always assumed beachcombers were just picking stuff up from the beach, but you know, sometimes they helped ships along their way. And
okay,
we'll just assume you're right, Philip.
I have to assume I'm right, right? That's so we'll just go with that. So we are now going to launch into spoilers. We'll start mildly, but then we'll get really hard into spoilers here for Wurms of Blearmouth. So we have essentially here a tale of the clash of the tyrants, right? We have, although I would say that it's not exactly an equal match. You do have this local tyrant wannabe, I guess is what he is. And I love the name that he made up for himself, because it's not his real name. His real name is, I forget, his real name is much less menacing. But he goes by Lord Fangatooth Claw the Render. Not the Renderer, right? So that's his tyrant name, I guess. So, and he has taken over from the previous, I guess, rulers of this particular village and this isolated, desolate place, this coastal place with some very interesting characters. You might just dismiss them on first sight as just a bunch of yokels, but there's a lot more to these characters, right, Ruthan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let me just pick up on what you said, Philip. So the way I interpret it would be, so it's not, to me, it wasn't really a clash of tyrants. It was a clash of tyrant philosophers, which is something we've seen in history and in fiction and all that. And the difference is that Bauchelain is an actual philosopher interested in the philosophy of tyranny, while Fangatooth is a tyrant who pretends to be a philosopher. And he's much more interested in that poor scribe who's constantly sort of having to write things down, and whatever he says. In many ways, he reminds me of Caros Invictad from Reaper's Gale, because Caros Invictad is another one of these, what I like to call wannabe intellectuals, who's far more interested in recording their thoughts than in actually living the life of ideas and questioning what they see and things like that. So that was the basic contrast to me, because Bauchelain, I mean, in Fiends and stuff, we will get into that as well, but he is not so much a tyrant as he is an intellectual and a philosopher who's interested in that as a sort of an intellectual exercise. Right? Listen, I've got to defend him here. So I completely sort of agree with AP in the sense that the atmosphere is very reminiscent of this closed-off coastal hamlet, and all of these people hate each other and all that. But you guys know me, right? I'm here for the Bauchelain stuff. That's what really draws me to these stories. And the fact that he gets a nemesis, and the fact that we see a resolution with this nemesis, makes the story quite close to my heart, because in Blood Follows, they get confronted by the rat catchers and they agree to leave. In Leaves of Laughter's End, Bauchelain has a face-off with the god, but that god just comes, knocks him off, and does different things and collects its babies and just goes away. In The Healthy Dead, by the time Bauchelain gets there, the tyrant is already dead. And of course, in Fiends is a lot more about the downfall of a tyrant than Bauchelain's already the usurper when that story starts. So here's where I actually got to see my boy face off against an antagonist, because even in Memories of Ice, which is of course where Bauchelain appears in the 10 big books, the only real scene that we get with Bauchelain in terms of a one-on-one is that brilliant scene with Quick Ben, which is my favorite scene in all 10 books. And by the way, I have to thank Stephen Erickson for telling me in the comment section that the inspiration for it was The Raven, the movie The Raven, and I had to find it and I had to buy that brilliant movie. That was just, I enjoyed that completely, and I can see how that inspired the whole Bauchelain vibe. One can totally see that. So here, just the way he defeats him, right? It's such a Bauchelain way of defeating him, and Bauchelain even has this great quote. I can't remember where he says that the use of physical violence is a failure. It's a step down for him. He doesn't believe in head-on physical confrontations where brute force wins out. He always feels that a true thinker and a true scholar always finds a cerebral way out. And the way he keeps tasting the cookie, and it's actually got these arcane runes in them, and the demon that comes out. I did a video on demons a while ago in sort of Stephen Erickson's canon, and once again he's like, "Oh, compliments to your lord." Demons are such a complex character with their own society and all that. We'll get into that in the Fiends discussion as well. Just everything about Bauchelain's rivalry with Fangatooth, and Fangatooth tries to poison him at the beginning, the first dinner that he hosts there. Yeah. He's already poisoned, and Bauchelain and Korbal Broach don't care. And Reese is like, "Oh, what the fuck? What about me then?" And Bauchelain says, "Don't worry, Emancipo. I've been sort of sprinkling your food with light traces of different poisons." So Reese, the one good thing that comes out of Reese is that he is now immune to most conventional poisons as well. The other thing I liked about this was Korbal Broach. I really thought Korbal Broach was quite interesting here. The physical comedy. So in our last discussion, I mentioned that The Lees of Laughter's End was one of the stories in which Korbal Broach really shines, and he does a lot here as well. So the way he keeps clashing with the homunculus that Fangatooth has built, and the way that these things are helpless against him, because these two guys can often be small fish in big ponds in some stories, and in some stories they can also be big fish in small ponds. And this is one of those cases where the two of them are the big fish in the small pond, where in this tiny little settlement, these creations that Fangatooth have might be sufficient to keep all of those people in check. But against the force of nature like Korbal Broach, whose curiosity just makes him rip their head off and inspect their limbs and all that, these guys have no chance. So that is what stands out to me immediately about the Wurms of Blearmouth.
Nice, very nice. AP, any thoughts about any of that?
Yeah, well, to touch on that last point, one of the things I liked was the way that Korbal Broach keeps apologizing. "Whoops, sorry, didn't mean that. I was just having a look." And you get, and again, it's one of these curious things about him as a character. It is almost a childlike wonder and glee in looking at things and taking them apart. And it's also that childlike lack of ability to understand repercussions, or the idea of complex morality. It's all id. It's all, I just want to do this thing, and because I want to do it, I just want to see what the thing is. And it's almost like that part of Korbal Broach is missing, his ability to go, "Oh, I've just destroyed this," and he didn't mean to. He just wanted to see how it worked, and he does it out of a sense of curiosity, out of a sense of joy in these, what some of us might consider abominations. And he's such a wonderful character that way, so very different to what we usually see. But one of the things I wanted to pick up was the idea of the big fish, little fish cardboard box. That in this, Lord Fangatooth, he fancies himself as a tyrant. But what we see is someone who thought, this is what a tyrant is. I just want that position, and doesn't want to do any of the work associated with it. And I think it's common enough in almost every country in the world that there are certain politicians and leaders that we see who want the position, but don't actually want to do the work or take the responsibility that goes with the position. And I think part of that is actually worked into this sort of caricature of Fangatoot, that he is one of these wannabes, one of these posers. It's he wants the recognition and do all of this without actually understanding what it is that he is meant to be doing.
Yeah.
It's again, it's all about his whims, and this is what I should do. So it's like standing on the tar at the beginning, looking out. So he strikes a dramatic pose with his arms outraised and saying to the scribe, like, write that down. And you haven't said anything yet. Well, don't write down my asides. And everything about it is faux. And then when we have someone like Bauchelain, and Bauchelain doesn't, he enjoys the concept of tyranny, but is not someone who really is wanting to set themselves up as a tyrant. It's a means to an end, because Bauchelain and Korbal Broach, a lot of what seems to drive them is this desire to find things out, to mess with things, to play with things.
Yeah.
And they don't mind playing with people's lives, kingdoms. The scope doesn't matter. They're more interested in finding out how things work and fiddling with it. And so he rocks up into this situation, and he does not at any point consider Lord Fangatoot a threat, a nemesis, anything other than who is this pretender? And because of his desire for cultured politeness, he firmly intends to get rid of him, but is going to do it in a very polite way, because why? To do it any other way would be uncouth. And you know, it's that level of, he never considers him a threat, whereas Fangatoot considers himself a rival, that they are somehow on the same plane, and they're playing completely different sports. They're not even in different leagues, completely different sports here. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun to see that, and we see this sort of thing play out in numerous stories where you have like the big bully of a school playground kind of thing going into the older age group, into a new school or a bigger school, and suddenly they realize that the world is a lot bigger and they're not as powerful or as smart as they thought they were. And that's an underlying lesson for our lives, because you know, we could go from thinking that we're one of the smartest people or one of the strongest people or one of the most talented people in whatever group, and as soon as you go out into the big wide world, you realize that no, there are a lot of people out there who are smarter, more talented, stronger, more athletic, everything. That we have to be more aware, self-aware, not only of our limitations, but also of our strengths, and try to build towards those. So bizarrely enough, in such an absurdist, silly, exaggerated horror story, there are some like themes that run through it that connect to an investigation of the human condition.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, so Ruthan Badd, I would say that your boy Bauchelain is probably a better philosopher than he is a tyrant, because he keeps losing his seat of tyranny. But I don't think he's that interested in keeping it either. So you know, he's always wanting to do the civilized thing. I also love how he prevails by baking cookies in this story. It's just so good. With, of course, demons locked inside them that want to eat the cookie burst out of, yeah, well, I mean, that's just, I was not predicting that. So that was pretty good stuff. And of course, you have Korbal Broach, who wants to lick the icing off the cookies in that childlike manner. So there's just some wonderful interactions in here. You have, of course, Emancipor Reese, who is, I think, probably for me, 70% of the comedy is often Emancipor's reactions to these guys. It's just it's so well done, and he's constantly trying to numb himself to adjust to the fear that is his life, being the manservant, the loyal manservant. Although we could talk about his motivations there, but so it's all really great stuff. I also like what you said earlier, Ruthan, about scribe Coingood, who, I mean, we actually talked about the names at some point in all these stories, because the names are just brilliant. Dickensian, really fun names. But the idea that Fangatoot trots around with this scribe in tow to write down all of his brilliance, and that he, in fact, will. Oh, by the way, everyone, Neelan is going to disappear once in a while, but he'll be right back. So no worries, he'll be back. But anyway, yeah, the idea
Sorry.
that, yeah, there he is. So the idea that he has this scribe in tow to record his brilliance, and even telling the scribe, when you record this conversation, make me say all the brilliant stuff. Like, he wants to take Bauchelain's lines, which is another indication of just how unequal this contest was in so many ways. But so I love that, because Erikson is always playing with history and the idea of recorded truth and all of that. So he's having a bit of fun there as well with our good scribe Coingood. But we also have these other characters, these villagers that we need to talk about, right? You have quite a cast of characters here. We have the people within the village, like Philuvel and her daughter Philittle, and you have the poor tax collector whom everyone ignores, Spilgit, and you have Hordillo. What's his title anyway? He's like a sheriff or something. He's an enforcer for Fangatooth. And you have Ackle. I love Ackle, the dead guy who can't die. And you have Red, right? Or as she would prefer to be known, Hurl, the witch. And you have Tiny and all of his brothers and his sister Relish. So you've got this wonderful convergence in Malazan fashion going on in this village, because everybody's chasing after each other. You've got a chase theme going on here too, right? So shall we talk about the villagers for a little bit? And
yeah. I mean, and as soon as that scene starts, where there's the guy arrives, the one who eventually we find out even has some kind of Segule mask in his outpost, which is once again a bit of a sort of whoa, what's going on there?
About Wafine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That first encounter between him and Bauchelain and Rhys, it's funny, but there's also a lot of suspense running in the background, where he's kind of wary of Bauchelain, but we are also told that him and Bauchelain are the only two ones who seem to be immune to the cold weather and to the drizzle or whatever that's going on. And it was and there's a good moment between Bauchelain and Rhys as well, where Bauchelain tells Rhys to get his knife ready, because he immediately identifies that this guy's not some small insignificant insect that they've run into in the middle of nowhere, that there's some layer behind the guy. And that to me set the tone already, that it starts off as comedy because there are other gatherers who come in to loot the corpses and all that as well. And we know from the end of the Lees of Laughter's End that the chanters are chasing the ship, the Suncurl, that they're on, and once the chanters come, the chanters have more page time in volume 2 than Bauchelain and Korbal Broach do. The chanters are a big part of all three of the stories that we're going to discuss, and it's like they are the Bowl brothers meets the Three Stooges. Tiny, Midge, and Flea. They sort of have a Bowl brothers vibe to them, in the sense that they kind of these dumb slapstick idiots, but at the same time we're also told that they can be quite powerful when they need to be, but they don't have much up here. I love the way, as usual, things converge in the bar at the end, where there's just complete chaos and people arrive. It's just great slapstick humor, and right from this is a worthy successor to Lees of Laughter's End, in the sense that this has very strong slapstick humor that can be technically studied and that can be technically analyzed. Fiends as well has a lot of slapstick humor that can be just in terms of conveying that sense of energy, that sense of chaos, and the back and forth dialogue. There's that, what's that, the lizard, the divas, there's a lizard or a cat, I can't remember.
The lizard cat is called Red, but obviously
Red, exactly.
It's Hurl.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought all of those were just great touches. They're just great examples of what I like calling Ericksonian humor. So somewhere later on, I might be doing I will be doing a collab with the Quick Gen and Ishka on Malazan humor. So especially nice. what I consider to be Ericksonian humor, I think there's a certain term that we can actually label it. And the Bauchelain books are a big part of establishing what everybody talks about, Jargoth humor. Yeah, that's all. But all of that comes under the canon of Ericksonian humor, where there are many different streams and they interact in very unique ways with characters, which is why I also feel that in real life Erickson has to be a troll. I mean, I understand that sort of there's this everybody says, oh, he's a compassionate person, he's an empathetic person, and all that, and all of that might be true. But my suspicion, reading many of these Bauchelain stories, and he once said that, or he said several times that in the 10 big books, Pearl's dialogue was based off of his. So there is a troll somewhere there that manifests in all these different ways. He kind of knows how to use humor to hit different meters, if that makes sense. And the final sort of screwball slapstick style showdown that we see between all these people at the end, where it just kind of bursts into anarchy, is a great example of that. So I would say that first scene set the tone, and from there we just get the build. And yeah, everybody in that village, as usual, are these small characters, but really fascinating and psychopathic characters.
Yeah. You're suggesting that Steven Erikson is making fun of people?
It's almost the quiet
how dare
ones.
AP, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you?
No, not at all. We'll get to that. But I get, like, all of this, with the exaggerated names, the slapstick humor, the chaos. It is exceptionally cleverly done.
Yeah.
And in almost all of the cases, there is the apparent person, the apparent character. I judge them, and then as the story develops, we realize there are these additional layers to them every single time.
Yeah.
From Red the lizard cat, it's Faluval, the owner of the brothel and bar, Philittle. Every single character in this has an apparent character, the sort of the surface character that we go, yes, we know what they are, who they are. And yet, even in a small novella like this, even in an absurdist novella like this, Erikson can't help but subvert expectations to develop characters, to show the complexity of characters, and that we are all so frequently wrong to judge people on first impressions or because of their accent or how they dress, that we make all of these assumptions so often. And perfect example of this are the chanters. Now, there are things that we find out about the chanters and what they do, and not all of the things that we think about them are wrong, but they are a lot deeper and more complex each time that we go into it. And if you think across all of these books, just in the Bauchelain and Korbal Broach novellas, one of the most common threads is there is an apparent character that you pigeonhole, you classify, you go, I know what this character is. And one of the major reveals through the story will be, you as reader were completely wrong about this character. All characters have a history. All characters have complexity. And that is something that I genuinely enjoy every time I read stuff like this, because we know Erikson is letting loose here and having a blast and a whale of a time, breaking all of the rules, doing what he just wants to do, to have fun as an author, to explore what you can do as an author. Without the, it has to be an epic and it has to follow these rules, or I'm being very serious about this. He is very serious about his craft, but this is exercising the craft in a different way to have fun. And that is the underlying sense of all this. Yeah.
I mean, one great example in the story is how do you say Woofine or Woofine or however you pronounce that? It totally threw me for a loop when suddenly this decrepit old comber, his stick transforms into this fiery sword, and he gets rid of some of the chanters. We have 3 fewer chanters after that moment. So that was really a bit of a surprise. And you realize, oh, there's something more to this guy. And he turns out to be some kind of, I don't know what he is exactly. Is an elder figure or?
God. He's a god.
He's a god. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's a god. Is he? I'm not sure which kind of god in the Malazan world he is, but
Retired.
What's that?
Yeah.
Retired.
Retired god. Yeah. Yeah. Looking back nostalgically on his youth, and you don't want to remind him of that, by the way. you don't want him getting nostalgic on you. So you get the feeling that he was a very ferocious god, perhaps, in his day as well. So, but he's gone to retire on this lovely coast, I guess. That's what he's up to.
But there are a couple of interesting things about him as a character. So the first, Ruthan already mentioned about the fact that there are Segula masks in his hut. And you go, that is an immediate, for people who are familiar with the Malazan universe, you go, how did he end up with those? And that should be an immediate sort of warning bell for you.
Yeah.
The little things like he's not really affected by the cold. The fact that, you know, as they were walking past, and Bauchelain had warned Emancipator to have the sword ready because Wurfin had a knife in his hand, and he, oh, sorry, how did that get? I'll just put that back.
Yeah.
You know, all of these sorts of things. But the scene where he's talking about the idol, that the stone idol that he is digging up from his latrine trench.
Right.
Because, and I didn't know this. Erickson actually told me about this. This is how people used to fake ancient stone artifacts to age them artificially. They would dig a pit, put the artifacts down, cover the pit over, and use it as a latrine trench because of the chemicals in urine over the course of a year would slowly erode and leach and falsely age the stone. So then they could dig it up, they could clean it all off, and then sell it to art collectors, quite often people on the black market, because these are historical artifacts that shouldn't have been removed from a country, and they have no compunction about selling it to these people because they're breaking the law, so why not sell them a fake? But this was one of the techniques, and I think it's a lot more complicated than I've just laid out, but I happen to remember that detail, that was one of the ways of aging these artifacts to make them look like ancient artifacts when someone had literally carved them the week before and then, you know, stuck them down into the ground.
Wow.
So you're telling me that some of these ancient artifacts that I bought might just be shit smeared statues?
No, Ruthan, I gave you those certificates of authenticity. They are absolutely authentic.
I've got to check those for AP's DNA. I don't trust him now.
Oh no! We also go ahead, AP. You had another point to make.
Well, yeah, it was about, because we with all of these sort of revelations about him, suddenly we realize that he's this god, that he had created this this idol, then which Hurl obviously is connected and getting power from the idol, which is transferred to is it Falush?
You mean Faluval?
Faluval.
Yeah.
And because he'd made a mistake with the chisel, and then went, oh no, I've broken. Oh well, I'll just fix this.
Right.
That's how Faluval ends up with not vagina dentata, but nipple dentata.
Yeah.
Which is just absurd body horror comedy.
Right.
And then, of course, because he updates the statue again, and her daughter then, she has a vagina dentata because she talks to herself. That all of this is just so absurd, so ridiculous, but levels of power and magic explored in a way that you would not get in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which has a very different tone and exploration of magic. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I was just going to mention too that we haven't brought up the crew from the Lees of Laughter's End, the Gust Hub and Heck and Birds, and these people make it's they're being chased, of course, by their colleagues whom they had abandoned, who are in turn being chased by the chanters, who are all chasing Bauchelain and Korbal Broach, and who, you know, the whole thing just sort of slams together. But I was glad for Gust Hub that he had some replacement parts, even if they weren't original, because he had really taken it on the chin and everywhere else in the Leagues of Laughter's End. We see this luck hasn't really improved any at all in the beginning, at least, of Wurms of Blearmouth. But by the end, he is, of course, given a little bit of love, I guess.
So people losing body parts and getting them back seems to be a theme in most of these Bauchelain stories anyway, where people are constantly losing parts of their bodies and then getting them back.
It happens. Yeah.
In Erickson's defense, obviously, if this needs defended, Star Wars did it first. Everyone gets their hand cut off in Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, and then gets, you know, like replacement body parts. Other people do it all the time. It's fine.
It's a thing in fantasy, right? It's a thing. So, yeah.
But again, like the absurdism of the crew getting ready to rush the castle because they're going to kill everyone, and it's the guard is facing them, and it's quick, throw a rock to distract the guard. They throw the rock. The guard turns around, and there's another guard has been sewn onto the back of them. So no matter what way the guard turns around, there's always a guard facing them.
But they're so ineffective as Korbal Broach's creations always are. They're never very effective. Of course, I think at one point, maybe not in this story, but in one of the stories, Emancipor brings up this point to Bauchelain, and Bauchelain is like, but don't tell him, you know, he's very sensitive about these things.
At the end of Fiends, yeah.
Yeah.
But
so,
he's learning. It's a learning process. Every step
right.
is a journey, as part of the journey along the way. You know, like none of us go, oh, well, now we know everything.
Right.
You know, it's all part of a process, and you have to respect that about Korbal Broach. He keeps trying. God loves a trier.
Yeah, he is an artist honing his craft.
Exactly. He's the child who plucks off one side of the butterfly's wings and wants to check if the butterfly can still fly.
Yep.
He's that kid.
Yeah. Yep.
So, anything else on Wurms of Blearmouth, gentlemen?
So yeah, just one last point. There's that guy Wormit, whom they rescue.
Yeah.
At the very end, and there's a great line where he's
brother,
like, oh,
right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Fangatu's brother. And he's like, oh, I'm glad Mercy's still alive. I thought Mercy was gone from the world, blah, blah, blah. And then when Bauchelain offers to free the other person as well, he's like, oh, no, not him. He cheats. And Bauchelain turns to Rhys and he says, this is how the world works, Mr. Rhys, right? This guy who was groveling for mercy and compassion, the minute his mercy does not extend, I think Bauchelain says, beyond the hairs on his body or something. And that just goes to AP's point. And the reason I love this is because it's almost like, and I mentioned this in our last collab as well, Bauchelain's philosophy is more or less a systematic rebuttal of Erickson's philosophy in the 10 big books, where Bauchelain's cynicism and Bauchelain's starkness always come through, and he's always there ready to point out that fundamentally most of us are just evil and selfish pieces of shit.
Well, and you have some backup for that, I think, in some of the characters that we haven't talked about, like Spilgit, the tax collector, for example, who makes the at some point or other, just sort of totally almost like narcissistic decision that it's all me now. I'm in it for, he's not very good at it, but he basically goes rogue and decides to, run away with the treasure and kill whoever's in the way, sort of thing. But you also have some fun interactions there with Ackle, the undead fellow, and Hordillo is another example. I mean, not only do you get to see just how absurdly self-centered people can be, we have totally unrealistic notions about ourselves, like Hordillo believing that he's some amazing ladies man, and
he does all right.
He seems to do all right. Yeah, I guess. Certainly with birds there, they have at least a brief thing, so, but doesn't do so well though with that wife that he never married though. And
again, the self lies that we tell ourselves, our own self delusions of not looking at our mistakes and failures from the past and things that we did wrong, and looking at all this. And the slow way that Erickson teases out what happened, and you're just, oh God, this is just getting worse every time he utters something. It just gets worse.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to mention about this, the exploration of what a Divers is like from inside the mind of a Divers was actually like a really cool little moment, because as far as I'm aware, that hasn't come up in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, where we get a sense of what the individual sort of minds within a Divers are like. We've had a Divers communicating with other people and referring to themselves as we, but this was a Divers lizard cat. And again, you have that wonderful play on the fact that people who have these pets that they love and go, oh, my pet is so beautiful and wonderful and gentle, as it is savaging the face off something. And they can't see it because it's their little baby.
Right.
So there's the wonderful sort of representation of that for humor's sake, but also this exploration of being a Divers and seeing it and seeing how they can get lost in their form. And then when she gets reunited, or well, Red is a he, but when he gets reunited with the bones of the other dead parts of it, recombines into a she. And so you have this wonderful play of what it means to be a Divers and how they think. So that I thought was a lot of fun. And for people interested in sort of the lore of the Malazan universe, was actually like a really cool little moment.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Any final thoughts, Ruthan Badd?
I would just say I'm going to start plugging that line that AP just brought up, because I've been looking for sort of tangible arguments to suck people in the Discord server into the Bauchelain book. So all these low experts or whatever, if you want to know what it's like, the psychology of a Divers, guys, come on, you got to read the Bauchelain books. That's where the actual gold is. And in Wolfine, we have an equivalent of Bug. We have a sort of a god in retirement or whatever. So for all of you who sort of fancy yourselves as Malazan experts, AP's line right there is my advertisement for you guys to pick up this volume.
Brilliant. Good sales job.
And then my last thoughts on this would be, listen, if you've read the first three, this is again, there are moments where when I was reading, was laughing aloud. There are moments that are just so ridiculous, so absurd, so funny. There are moments where I was cringing in that sort of, when you see that kind of comedy and you're like, oh God, no, please don't. Oh no, they did. To elicit reactions like that. These books are so much fun. They are incredibly well written. They are deceptive in how they appear, because they are incredibly well crafted. And that is something that we kind of overlook because they are silly, they are fun. It's a bit like when you read Sir Terry Pratchett's work. Because they are funny, you forget about how smart they are, how well done they are, and how difficult it is to do humor in writing. And that's something that comes across. Not that the humor here is the same as the Discworld series. They are very different. Yeah. But this is these stories are incredibly funny. They are plays on horror, parody, there are satirical elements. There's so much to them if you're willing to engage with them, both in terms of the writing, in terms of themes, in terms of challenging assumptions. And all of that stuff, if you're willing to engage with it and think about it a little bit, you actually get a huge amount more out of it than just, it's a funny story where this weird stuff happens. And that's, I think it works on multiple levels. And that's, my finishing thoughts on this.
Brilliant. Yeah. So everybody, if you're looking for some good laughter, if you're looking to cringe a bit, and if you're looking for some really placed, brilliant satire, and just something that'll provoke you into thinking about the human condition in all of its awkwardness and glory, then the Bauchelain and Korbal Broach novellas are definitely for you. So, well, I just like to thank you too as well for this really fun discussion. I had a blast. Thank you, Ruthan Badd. It's always great.
Thank you, Philip. It was an honor.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always great to hear what you have to say about anything Malazan and otherwise. Also want to tell people about your channel that you've been doing, your 7-minute lecture channel, which is brilliant stuff. Everybody go check out. Ruthan Badd has another channel on YouTube called 7-minute lectures. It is brilliant stuff, all kinds of interesting topics. Do you want to say a quick word about it?
So it's just a channel with 7-minute rants on anything that catches my fancy. So international relations, fiction, technology. So I have one that I just uploaded about an hour ago on whether we can solve the God equation, which was what Albert Einstein worked on for the last 30 years of his life. So, and I did one on a Japanese comic book called One Piece yesterday. So it's got a lot of variety. It's a way of keeping me sane. So hopefully other people enjoy it as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
And if I could add something on that, Ruthan is actually underselling how good the 7-minute lecture series actually is. They are incredible. They are pithy, short, to the point overviews of some really interesting topics, and they run the gamut, as he was just saying. But I cannot recommend them enough. They are really good. I'm subscribed, and I'm finding them absolutely fascinating. So I look forward to viewing more of them as you keep putting them out.
So there you have it.
It's always nice to be complimented by two people a lot smarter than I am. So thank you to the both of you.
I don't know who's he talking about, AP?
I have no idea. Not us anyway.
So thank you, Ruthan Badd. It's awesome to see you. And AP, thank you so much for being here. And we have some very interesting things to discuss now, don't we? Another story, a Bauchelain, and there's a certain critic who will be appearing in this next discussion. So I am so looking forward to talking about Craigpaw Trail.
You know, I was going to say it was such a genuine pleasure to be here, and you always managed to ruin it just in the last couple of seconds, Philip. Thank you so much for having me on your channel again. I really do enjoy it.
All right, always a pleasure.